recall, the first part we discussed last week. Now I just want to run through this. We didn't manage to do it last week, and then go over the new presentation. Okay, so we mentioned, I think, last week that this is a process. It's a whole process, and not just a one-off. So now this process, we want to mention a bit more about the process, and this is what Imam rahimahullah continues with. So this is the purification process, and how we can attain ultimate purification. So we'll just run through these few slides because I want to go on to the next presentation. So this is the first part, that one must understand the necessity of any of these qualities we'll be discussing. So any of these qualities, the first and foremost, if a person doesn't feel it to be important, there's just no any benefit really. So the importance of that, the necessity of, and the desire must come from a person, himself or herself. Remember, as in very simply we say in English, that you can take the horse to the water, but you can never force it to drink. So this is the same thing. The desire must be internal. The person must have that desire to purify himself or herself, and that's the first thing. Understanding, creating this self-awareness within oneself, obviously, about the importance, and then obviously fulfilling the requirements. And see, a person must accept that, look, there are these diseases. A person knows, a person knows about a person's physical disease. Just now I just came back from the hospital, and every day there's diagnosis. So one of my friends, his mom, just being diagnosed with what? Hodgkin's. Now this is a blood cancer, So every day we know about these diseases. Every day somebody is making a diagnosis, etc. Now these diseases, who will make the diagnosis? Number one. And number two, who will treat these diseases? And the first step, inshallah, is knowledge. And this, inshallah, is the first step in the right direction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the realization, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the guidance to implement what this beautiful book tells us about. Okay, and remember, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Quran, Allah says in Quran, Aqimis Salah. Everybody is aware of that. We must perform Salah. Allah says, give Zakah. Everyone is aware of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, go for Hajj. Everyone is aware of that. But just like that, Allah tells us, have sabr. Allah says, stay away from bukhl, being miserly, stingy. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, stay away from hasad, jealousy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, stay away from kibr, pride. These diseases, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us to stay away from. But unfortunately, my dear brothers and sisters, in today's time, there is this sort of general amnesia with regard to it. Everyone will know Salah is farad, the person must perform Salah. But within himself or herself, these diseases that are spreading like cancers, and because of which there is so much hatred in the world, there's so much aggression in the world, how can we recognize it? And Allah willing, how we can slowly make that effort to purify it. So this is the importance. Now this is an interesting question, and I'd like your views. Are we inherently evil? Intrinsically, are we evil? Anybody wants to start off? What do you think? Do we become evil? Are we intrinsically, we've got nothing to do with this? Anybody, inshallah? Don't worry, we will finish by 6:30. I know you want to go and watch the match. It's okay, but inshallah we will finish. Anybody wants? Yes.
So it's basically up to the person what path they want to go to. Basically, if they want to be a good person or if they want to be like a bad person.
So the onus is on the person himself or herself. Okay, anybody agrees? Who thinks that we are inherently evil? We will always gravitate towards the evil path, given two choices. Does anybody think that?
Listen, so basically in terms of our nafs consistently goes towards ease, isn't it? So whenever we want, in terms of our desires and doing all this kind of things, our nafs wants us to go towards that kind of way. But I don't think in terms of when we're born that we are inherently evil, but we can get taught to do, and we sort of want to do the things that actually may be wrong, considered wrong.
Very good point, mashallah. That's making a distinction. That are we, for example, in Christianity there is the concept of original sin. So everyone, no matter what, a person is born with the sin hanging on his head, the cloud of sin. Now, let us see what the scholars say with regard to this. So in the poem, Imam Mawlud cites Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. Imam Ghazali was a great Imam, and he was 11th century English, but 5th century Islamic. He was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had gifted him with great acumen. He was able to, in a philosophical way, deal with spirituality. So his position, he says, that it is indeed an obligation for everyone to learn of the ailments of the heart and their cures. I mean, everyone will agree with that. And then he says that these diseases are inherent to the human condition. That's interesting, isn't it? Okay, one can observe, for example, greed, jealousy, hatred, and the like in children, though the disease do not necessarily endure. Okay, let's carry on. So in short, though Muslim scholars of the caliber of Imam al-Ghazali do say that diseases of the heart are related to human nature, they would also say that this manifests itself as human inclination. Okay, so this is what Imam Ghazali rahimahullah has said. But like I think the brother has said, Allah says in Quran, a very telling ayah, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Allah talks about the nafs, the ego, the self. And Allah says it has the propensity, it has the capability, it has the potential to either go towards the wrong path, the misguided path, or the path of guidance and the path of hidayah, the path of light. So within a person, himself or herself, we cannot say that a person is inherently evil or inherently good for that matter. It is upon that person. And that is why there is a consequence for every choice we make. If we didn't have the choice and we inherently gravitated towards an evil path, then why would there be punishment? And if we always did what is good because it's our nature to go towards good, then what would be the mean of rewarding that person? He's going to do it or she's going to do it. So this is what Islamically we say, that a person inherently is not either evil or good. He or she has the capability, the potential to maximize the good nature within oneself and mitigate the risk of the bad nature within oneself, and that's the choice of each and everyone. So it's a positive, conscious choice that everyone makes, and this is what basically the scholars normally would say. Now remember these, as I mentioned very briefly, let us through an analogy look at the disease of the heart. Okay? So the heart contains a seed that has the potential, like I mentioned, of becoming like a cancer that can metastasize, meaning an aggressive sort of cancer, and overtake the heart. So it has this potential. Now look, for example, tuberculosis, TB. It's living latent in a person's lungs for millions of people. The other day I was called up to ICU. It was a very sad case. A person, young man, about maybe 40 or so, and he came home and he was with his wife, and all of a sudden he felt this terrible headache. He was rushed into the hospital. What has happened? An aneurysm, meaning that in his brain, his blood vessel ruptured. So I asked the doctor, that can this not be detected? He said, no. How can every person? it's latent in that person. Yeah, it could have ruptured, it could be genetic, it could be, it's just that when it's time for it to rupture, there is no way that we can go on and screen millions and millions of people and see if does everyone have this latent deficiency within themselves. So it's latent within that self, and when the time is ripe, then it comes and it manifests itself. So exactly like that, these diseases are latent in us. If given that opportunity to ripen and that conducive environment, it starts to grow. So that's why it's important. That's why the concept of Islam, if I may just digress slightly, there is a very great principle in Islam of Saddul Dhara'i, Saddul Bab. Saddul Bab means that close the door. Don't even open the door. Leave the door closed. And understanding the principles of Sharia, this is a very important principle. In that, if, one way, if you want to see, if you leave the door, right? Now, one way is that if you want to heat, if you want to control the temperature of this room, is leave the door open and put on the aircon. Or if you have a fire, light a fire and leave the door open. And so it's always a combat. Will the aircon win, or will the external forces, outside forces win? Okay, which are coming through the door. And on the other hand, is just close the door, right? There is no way that the external force of the cold to come inside, and automatically the room will become hot without an external agency needed. And this is a similar concept in Islam. That, see, Allah says from the very beginning that always lower your gaze, so that the fire is not lit. Now, on the other hand, is another concept, that feed yourself with all you want to. Light that fire, but now try to control it. So Allah says in the concept in Islam is don't light the fire in the first place. And this is called Saddul Dhara'i, that these don't create an atmosphere that is conducive for those latent cancers, spiritual cancers, for them to start to thrive. So this is basically, so when our immune system especially, and remember immune system you can say is like our taqwa, the level of our taqwa. This is the immune system, because our taqwa, the level of our taqwa, it helps us fight the diseases of sin. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said when the son of Adam sins, then a black spot appears in the person's heart. If the person repents, it is erased. But if he does not, it continues to grow until the whole heart becomes darkened. This Imam Ghazali rahimahullah considers ailments of the heart to be part of the Adami, as in we are all humans from Adam alayhi salam. So this is within us. So other scholars simply consider these ailments to be predominant in man. That is, most people have these qualities, but not necessarily everyone. So this is basically this concept. It's a very, very interesting concept, and we'd love to dilate on this, but because of time, let us carry on. Now this purification, from when does it start, and from when does it, until when does it end? And this is a purification that is lifelong. It is a journey that is lifelong. From the very cradle to the grave. Because remember, it is interesting that a great Imam has mentioned that it is impossible to totally eradicate, totally eliminate the diseases completely. They will always remain latent. That's why you will know that there are very, very famous stories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it. That there were those who became such great scholars, such great saints, but over love of the fleeting world, those who had already a great, Allah talks about it in Quran, in the time of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, that there was a great person. He was great. In fact, let's take an even obvious example, Shaitan himself. Shaitan, Iblis, was a great abid. In fact, it comes that there was no place on this earth where he did not make sajda. So he had already attained such a great status, and he was even given to be like the Amir, the leader of a group of Malaika. He was so great. This same shaitan, Iblis, was so great. But remember, within us as humans and jinns, that innate nature is that it was latent. So all these diseases of kibr were latent. When the opportunity arose, and it was conducive, then that Iblis, within that Iblis, that kibr which was latent, although after years and years of sacrifice, he had attained such a high rank, it was still latent. And that's when it erupted, when it was in the confrontation with Adam alayhi salam. So remember, no matter how far and how high we become and how noble we may think we become, we always have to remain circumspect, always cautious, and never trust a person's self. That's why, like I mentioned, let us try to keep the door closed. Don't open the door of temptation, because it is very difficult to resist. Rather, keep away. So remember, it's a lifelong process. This is an interesting hadith. Nabi Wasallam has mentioned that every child that is born on fitrah. Fitrah meaning a person with an innate desire, nature to do good, to gravitate towards it. So Nabi Wasallam said, "Kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitrah." But what changes is our cultures, because we learn our cultures from the very beginning. فَأَبَوَاهُ. The first lap for every child is the mother. The mother has the greatest influence on the child, the mother, the father. So, فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانِهِ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانِهِ. Nabi of Allah said, then the parents have a great role in shaping this person's outlook of life. So some will make him into a Christian, some will make him into a Jew, some will make him into a Maggie and fire worshippers. So, what we need to do is that it is within us. Remember, it's within each and every person to gain this rectification, this purification. It is within us. It is innate to us. It is intrinsic to us. Now, all we need to do is, where it's become polluted, to unpollute it and nurture. Let it grow within us. That nurture. That's why another word is called tazkiyah, purification. And one source of the word tazkiyah in Arabic is from zakka. Zakka yuzakki, which means to thrive, to grow. So when we let ourselves grow in goodness, this is the true tazkiyah. Okay. Don't worry, that was just the first slide. Now today, inshallah, I'm going to carry on right through with 3 spiritual diseases. So far, the past 2.5 weeks or so, we've been talking about these diseases. Now, what are they? What are they? So the book starts off with listing 25 different spiritual maladies, and he starts off in an alphabetical order. So it's not from the most gravest to the least, but rather in alphabetical order, the Arabic alphabet. So the first is starting with Ba. And these are, the first one is Bukhl. Bukhl means miserliness, person who is a miser. Okay? Now everyone will agree. I mean, everyone across creeds, across ethnicities, across all cultures in the world, that to be a miser is not something that anybody desires to be. Now, what is Bukhl in Sharia? So there are 2 stages of Bukhl, 2 stages of stinginess, miserliness, niggardliness in Sharia. And what are they? The first stage, which is farad, compulsory upon each and every one of us to stay away from, is this one. And when there is a need for us, there is established rights, remember, in our wealth for different people. And when we find inhibited, we find ourselves not being able to fulfill that Islamic right, this is termed bukhl in Sharia, and this is haram. This is a major sin. And it is a malady of the heart. So, we will discuss a few. So, what are the signs and symptoms that I may have this in my heart? I may be you know, in my heart there may be this bukhl. So what are the signs and symptoms? Zakah. For those who are supposed to give zakah, at the time of giving zakah, what is the condition of my heart? First of all, do I give it? If I do not, something wrong. This is a sign and symptom. And similarly, you know, when I do give zakah, how do I feel? Do I feel happy about it? Do I feel like I'm doing the poor person a favor? Or do I feel that the poor person is doing me a favor? And with what good cheer do I do? So these, while we give our zakah, you know, we should analyze our heart. How is our heart when giving zakah? Remember, these are the fara'id we're talking about. Similarly, Hajj, if it is affordable to go for Hajj, what do we do? And with what good cheer? This is very interesting, because Hajj involves spending a lot of money. Doesn't mean that you should go at the very 5-star Hajj or the most expensive package, you know. And if you go on a 2-star Hajj, you're a bakhil, you know. Bakhil meaning a stingy person. But it means that whatever you can afford, how willing are you to spend on such an important pillar of Islam? Very interesting, and I was just thinking for myself, just food for thought also for you, is that when it comes to spending in the places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Nabi of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam have told us and encouraged us to spend, Hajj, Udhiyah, Qurbani, sacrifice, Aqiqah, when a child is born, Sadaqatul Fitr, Zakatul Fitr, etc. Right? What is our condition? How willing are we to spend? And how happy are we to spend on this? And how much do we spend on here? Is it that when it's time for Udhiyah, for example, then we'll go for that very cheap sacrifice in India that just costs £10? Why? Because of the butcher, it's £100 here, so I'd rather go and get 7 in India or in Bangladesh or wherever it is. Or is that our response? Similarly, at the time, you know, of Aqiqah, it's a celebration, and Islam tells us to celebrate the birth of our child. Do I prefer that, I'll just give it to somebody in Pakistan? Why? Because it's just £7 there, here it's £70. So that's interesting. We need to look at ourselves during that time. And then on the other side, when it is haram to spend, and Sharia tells us to be very simple, the most common one is weddings. Then what happens? So we haggle over the price of the Qurbani, but when it comes to weddings, then what is it? Need I say more with regard to it? So it's interesting to see the condition of our heart during that time. And remember, it's all personal to each person. It's not pointing fingers at anybody. We are all in the same boat, really. You know? And it's just interesting to see how my response is to these different situations. So remember, in Sharia there are these rights, the rights of the wife. Yes, guys, you have to pay for it. Children. Yeah? These are all. So when it comes to halal avenues and our spending in there, with what good cheer do we or do we not spend? And this will show the condition of our heart. Okay. Now I said there were 2 stages of bukhl. So the first I said was when it hinders and it's an obstacle for us in spending in where we must spend. And remember, this is haram. Now the next stage is not haram, but it's makruh. It's against a person's, it's contrary to the norms, the social convention that governs kindness. Muruwa, we say in Arabic. So it's against muruwa. So although a person, we won't say that person is doing a sin, but it's just that that heart is a lesser stage of bukhl still existed in that person's heart. And this is what it literally means, muruwa, valor, chivalry, and virtue. So when we do something against that, this is the second stage. So what are the signs and symptoms that, okay, we're not on the very first stage of bukhl, but now the second stage, which Sharia also says we should try and refrain from, is, see, for example, if somebody owes us money, then how flexible and lenient are we with that person, especially when that person is in need. You know? Now, this is interesting because Nabi of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam has praised that person who is lenient on his or her creditors. So when a person owes somebody something, how are we stalking that person all the time? Or are we willing to show kindness? Obviously, don't be so kind that you lend everybody all your money and the next day you are begging somebody else. It doesn't mean that way. Yes, so you should be worldly wise, absolutely. But where, for example, your creditor desperately needs to, needs just a few more days, are you willing to give that person? So although you can demand, it's your right in Sharia to demand at the time and place of when it was decided that the repayment is going to take place. But if the person asks for a day or two, this is where the second side comes about, to be lenient to creditors. Similarly, guests, how do we treat our guests? How kind are we to guests? What sort of conduct do we have with guests with regard to it? Are we open-hearted? Will we put the best for our guests? Or are we slightly hesitant? Allah forbid that when guests come, we will give them something that is, we ourselves don't even want to eat. So this is another instance. Similarly, how do we haggle, like I mentioned, with regard to buying things, giving things? Obviously, if you're going to Morocco and you're going to those places where they see us and they put it 300% up and you can haggle, that's fine. But, especially when doing good things, because remember, when we go out to buy something, then we are actually, if we make the right intention, that this person also needs, he has needs, he or she has needs. He has to fulfill these different needs to different people. And all I'm doing is that I'm trying to provide a little bit. I'm getting something from it, I'm getting the commodity. But if my intention is that, okay, inshallah, through this, the profit he will make, reasonable profit he will make, or she will make, at least they will be able to provide for their family. This is such a great niyyah. And how much do we go out, squeeze even that last bit from the lemon? So about haggling, especially in times of spending, for a person's family, spending on goods. Okay, this is what it means. Similarly, when we give, how much cheer do we give with? How good are we when we spend in good paths? What is the condition of our heart, and how cheerful are we really with regard to it? And this is unfortunate, but it's quite common. Then when it's time to give, then we will give that thing that we would not like to take at all. So it's sadaqah, when it comes to giving charity, then we will give the worst thing we got in our house. And that thing which we ourselves do not want. Now let us talk a little bit about it. See, if you don't need something, fair enough. You can give it to somebody to use. Like you can send it to Africa, where people will appreciate something we don't really want. But the true spirit of charity, remember, is to give, yes, also that part, but also to give things you like yourself. Allah says in Quran, doesn't it? لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. That when you give in charity, just like you would love to receive something that is good, wouldn't you like to give to somebody else that is something that is good also? So how are we when we give in sadaqah, in charity? Do we always give something that is shoddy, that is inferior, that thing we don't want, that is stale? Or is it within us that we'd like to give also something that is good, something we ourselves like, we also give? So this is the second stage of. Now remember, the antithesis of bukhl is generosity. So if a person does not have bukhl, he will have generosity in his life. If he does have generosity, he can't have bukhl, because they are not coexistent. So to understand this concept more is understanding the opposite of it. So see, generosity. In Arabic we say karam. Ikram. This is generosity. This also means nobility. So a person who is generous is a person who is noble in society. Just like a miser in society is a person who is ignoble. Similarly, Allah Himself is called Al-Kareem, the one who is most generous. So remember, it is an amazing concept in Islam that in a hadith, Nabi of Allah has said, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ. Bring within yourselves the character of Allah also. how do we bring the character of Allah in our lives? Allah is such a great Allah. And that is in things like this. See, Allah is Al-Kareem, we can also aspire to show a little bit of the manifestation of karam in our life, of generosity. And remember, this is obviously an expression of the gratitude that Allah Himself has bestowed upon us, that we give to others. Gee, etiology, anybody knows what that means? This is when we study diseases, the origin of the disease, where does it come from, etc. So to understand it. So this is root diagnosis, because remember, when you identify a problem, it's half solved. Now, identifying where this comes from, this, inshallah, we will be able to go to the very crux of the disease and be able to uproot it. Because remember, for the rest of our life, we will just be treating the signs and the symptoms and not really the root cause of the disease. And that's why it's very important to know correct and root diagnosis. So if we study, why are people misers? What stops them from giving? Why is this there? You know, why if I find in my life, why am I hesitant when it's time to give in a good cause? Why do I feel that hesitance in there? Then it's because obviously one of the root causes the Imam mentions is the love of this fleeting worlds. We would want to give others. Why? Because we want to keep it for ourselves. And at the back of our mind is, I'm going to live 1,000 years. And I'm going to need it, and I'm going to get the better and the best of this world. So, and this is the root cause of most, if not all, of these spiritual diseases. The love of this fleeting world, not understanding the transitory, ephemeral nature of this world. That's why in Arabic we have, for a person who is always tight-fisted, there's a word we use, masak. And it literally comes from constipation. So a person who is miserly is like a person who's constipated in wealth, you know, and ardently clings on wealth and hoards it, wanting more. Now what are the harms, if we are not careful, of ridding ourselves of this spiritual ailment? Then remember, beautifully said by Ali radiallahu anhu, and this is rationally thinking about the harms of this. Ali radiallahu anhu once said, and he was noted for his great intelligence. He said the worst person is the miser. Why? In this world, in this very world, the miser is such that he doesn't even spend on himself. So in this world, he's deprived of his own wealth. And in the year after, what to say about the person in the year after? And that is so true. If you really think about it, it's amazing. Because the miser is such that he doesn't even spend on himself or herself. So they have plenty of wealth, but what's the use of it? What was the use of it? So they live impoverished lives. They have so much money, and you'll see this, unfortunately, a lot with our older generation, unfortunately. That concept of hoarding and not even using it for your own self. So you live in an impoverished life in this world, and one of the reasons why a person, you know, is miserly is the fear of poverty. And if I give somebody, what will be left for me? And this is naturalism. But in reality, the miser never truly feels relief of anxiety, because it's always more and more and more. And always lack of trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's grand plan with regard to ourselves. So the person does not give to relieve anxiety, but in reality, it just increases anxiety by being miserly. And remember, especially those who are in positions of leadership, it should never go together. A leader and a miser, no. Because the Nabi of Allah said, do you know of any disease that is worse than miserliness? So what's the treatment? Do we need to go to a hospital like that? Okay. So it is quite a simple treatment. Think, reflect, and ponder. That a miser is that person who exhausts himself or herself over a long period of time to what? To hoard some wealth. So they exhaust themselves, but then, before they can even enjoy it, life has passed away. That's why you will find, and that's why it's amazing in this world, isn't it, if you think of it. When you're young, and you can really take that Ferrari around the bend, you've got no money to buy it. And when you're old and you can't even drive over 50, that's when you get it. So it's an amazing concept, isn't it? Huh? So life passes on and time runs out, and we've exhausted, we've worked our fingers to the bone to accrue so much wealth, but life has passed away. And when we have accrued that wealth, sometimes we are physiologically not well enough to even enjoy it. And that's amazing, isn't it? So we must reflect and think, that is it really something we'd like to be associated with? And remember that shame. Nobody really likes a miser. So that shame-based culture, haya in Islam, comes about. That this is something that nobody really likes. Okay. And remember, let us do what we are supposed to do. This will not only purify our hearts, this will not only purify our assets, but also will purify our heart and soul. Okay, I think time is going on. Are there any questions so far with regard to the first condition? Anybody? Okay, let us quickly go on to the second one. This is, as I said, is carrying on with ba. It's called batr in Arabic. Quran mentions it many a time. And in English it's called wantonness. And what does it mean? Excessiveness. That an unbridled desire to need and want more. A desire that has no reins. Nothing reins that desire. Have you heard of this word hubris? It beautifully describes this quality of batr. When a person has, especially a person who is affluent, they lose contact of reality. There is an overestimation of one's own competence, accomplishments, or capabilities, especially when one is in a position. And this is what is the crux of this quality of batr, which we need to rid ourselves. So this also displays itself when we do not properly bear the responsibility of wealth. The blessed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us wealth, and wealth is a blessing. It's a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and where we have it, we should definitely spend it in the right channels. But when we are unable to, this is a sign of this disease of wantonness, of batr. And it ultimately also leads to a person oppressing others. It's usually, especially in our types of society, affluent societies, particularly vulnerable. It shows itself in extravagance and in arrogance. When a person finds in himself or herself extravagance. This in Islam there's a beautiful concept of simplicity. And this is the thread of Islam that flows through Islam, simplicity. It doesn't mean to have the best nice clothes and nice shoes and whatever else it is. You like, that's fine, you have a nice car also. But in general, Islam is about simplicity. And this is the life of Nabi of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. He was given the opportunity, and it was told to him, if you want, O Muhammad, the very mountains of Uhud, which are surrounding Medina, we can turn that into gold for you. And what did Nabi of Allah say? That I'd like that I eat one day and stay hungry for the next day. So the day I got food, I am thankful to you, O Allah. And the day I am hungry, I exercise sabr and patience. So I have the two qualities of shukr and sabr. And this is, we should try to bring this more in our life, really. Simplicity, extravagance, arrogance, that is not really trademarks of a Muslim and of Islam either. So living beyond one's means in order to maintain the appearance of affluence. And this is sad. Many a time people cannot get that, that person they want to appear to be. And because of that, a person lives beyond their means, gets into all sorts of trouble with debts and all this. And this is so important for them, appearance. How do others view them rather than how I view myself? That is such a sad life where I'm so worried about how others think of me, how others perceive me than me myself. And this is unfortunate, my dear brothers and sisters. And this leads to falling headlong into debt in order to achieve a certain material standard of life. So, what is the treatment? And remember, treatment, as you can see, is always pills. And pills are bitter. They're not normally nice. And definitely, if you want the true treatment, normally you have to go through some bitter pills to get the good cure. So one thing to restrain ourselves, this unbridled desire for extravagance, and is to bring one beautiful way, and this helps with a lot, is voluntary nafil fasting. When we fast, we're teaching ourselves a process of self-restraint. And remember, Nabi of Allah showed us many models, like for example, fasting 3 days every month. Not only is it good for you physically, but it is definitely good for you spiritually. So like the 13th, 14th and 15th of every Islamic month, fasting on Mondays and Thursdays, this is a sunnah of Nabi of Allah. And even there is a sunnah of Dawood where he would fast throughout the year, 1 day fast and 1 day not fast. That is called also Som Dawood. I would encourage that for you, especially when you are in university and you need as much brain power as you need. But if you can, try to do this, especially in winter. It's really good to fast in winter on Mondays and Thursdays. And you feel that spirituality if we do it correctly. Because remember, too much food definitely harms the spiritual heart. The ulama are almost unanimous. The scholars are unanimous that if there's one thing that harms the spiritual heart is excessive indulgence in food and sensual pleasures. That heart becomes covered and it cannot gravitate towards good because of this. So too much food. Obviously don't eat too little also, but always balanced and in moderation. And literally, if you eat too much food, your heart does become hard. The arterial, this sclerosis, causes the hardening of the arteries. So not only spiritually, but physically, your heart does become hard by eating excessively and being indulgent in this. So try a pattern of fasting. Whatever suits you, whatever is good for you, and maintain it. And inshallah, you will see results. Remember, Nabi of Allah said, As-siyamu junnah, that fasting is a shield. It is a shield from many, many spiritual diseases. It enlightens a person is able to think correctly if he fasts well. And in fact, it is very commonly encouraged now. I'm sure you heard of they call the 5-2 diet. Anybody knows about it? Eating normally like whatever your calorie intake is for 5 days, and then 2 days eating like only 500. Have you not heard of it? You people don't need to diet, that's why. But it's even known, the 5-2 diet and different diets, etc. And this is also one sure way of reining ourselves and putting things into perspective. And many of the spiritual maladies, this is a sure cure. And Nabi of Allah himself has mentioned it. The remembrance of death. For interest's sake, does anybody recognize the picture? That is Jannatul Baqi. Now just imagine those who are much, much, much more greater than us in every way. This is where they are today. One day, we will be just like them. And this is a powerful message. And it's just not that we become so fearful of death at every time, and it makes us, can't do anything really because we're so fearful of death. No, it's just about putting things into perspective. That break in life, that we don't headlong, rushing headlong without any breaks. This is a true break, the remembrance of death. And remember, it's not only remembrance. The better word is reflection. To reflect that one day, and this is inevitable, absolutely inevitable, unavoidable. There's nobody who does not accept this. But death is something that will come and visit each and every one of us. So to remember that really, and this, maybe once, if you can, once a week, at a specific time, preferably before we go and sleep, or once a day, whenever we can, even if it's just 5-10 minutes, just to think about this. That one day I'm going to leave this world. How would I like to leave this world? How would I go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and answer for the day I just spent? And if this was my last, Steve Jobs, you all know him. It was an amazing philosophy of his life. He said something like this, that live your life like as if every day is your last, because he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, isn't it? And he said, live it in that way. And it's true, live every day like as if it's our last. And we live it to the full, obviously, in the right sense. And also, it saves us from this extravagant lifestyle that is so alluring to us. And remember that try to increase our reflection, because death is the beginning of a series of events. So with death, obviously it's the visiting of the angel of death. Then it's going into the qabr, going into the grave, where the three questions will be asked. And the Nabi of Allah ﷺ says, the grave is either for you a garden from the gardens of paradise, or a pit from the pits of hell. And then it's a long sleep. Imagine these people, how long they've been in their graves. Thousands and thousands of years. SubhanAllah. It's an amazing concept. And then finally is the Qiyamah, the resurrection. And then the day of Qiyamah itself. Then the bridge of Sirat, the weighing of the deeds. All this, bring this slowly, slowly. And think, how will I fare at each step of this tremendous, amazing journey that each and every one of us will one day pass through. And remember, try to consistently reflect over it. Now you see, this is very interesting in our time, because this is the reality of Badr. Everywhere we look, everything is calling us. The billboards, these people with the ecstatic postures, exaggerated smiles, gaping mouths, presenting this picture of supreme happiness, supreme happiness, that this is the way. And everywhere we go, switch on the television, even on the billboards coming up in here. So this is what is calling us, and this is what we seem to measure our success in life, is by this concept that is being portrayed to us over and over again, this concept of being supremely happy, this utilitarian concept, hedonistic concept. And remember, with this advertising, etc., that comes about, then it's not only the product we buy with it the whole culture that is associated. So when you buy that perfume, then even you'll see, like in children, when we were children, we used to watch wrestling. And we go home and we start to wrestle in that, because it comes into us. When you buy whatever perfumes you buy, then that poet, the way we walk also is almost like that actress that walked that way. The way we dress, subconsciously sometimes we start acting like that person. The way we talk, we change our voices amazingly, And so that whole culture with that product comes into our life, and this sometimes subconsciously. So this is quite interesting, my dear brothers and sisters, and this is the reality. So remember, they sell a lifestyle, and this lifestyle is not compatible with our true Islamic ethos, because it glorifies wantonness and subtly dissuades reflection. Islam is a reflective religion, thinking about the reality of things. It's not a boring thing, but it's just about being realistic, pragmatic about life, And this is, and see, my dear brothers and sisters, many a time, I say to my friends also, and I say to myself also, that many a time if we look at the news, read the newspapers with the eye of Iman, sometimes just reading newspapers can lift our Iman. Now, how is that possible? That we see those people portrayed on the advertising boards, And those people who seem to have that aspired position which each and every one of us aspires to, how unhappy they are. Why do they need cocaine then to get a high if they got such beautiful thing? Why are they suicidal? If we want that lifestyle, the person who already has that lifestyle should be supremely happy. He shouldn't be having any suicidal thoughts. That person shouldn't be craving media attention by doing these ridiculous things, ludicrous things. No. So you see, that's the reality of this world. And Allah says it beautifully in Quran. Allah uses the word zuyyina. Zuyyina linnas. Allah has beautified the world. It's just a covering. It's covering. And the reality is something else. Remember, this world is not for forever and will never ever be forever. The true life is the life of the hereafter. I think we will stop there today. If that's okay? Yes. The next one, inshallah, is about hatred of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are there any questions before we go? Just one thing. What did you say? Okay. Shall I write it down? I'm happy for you to contact me if you need to. I'll give you my email address.